April 1814. The most powerful man on the planet steps off a ship onto a rock. 220 kilometers of land, 12,000 inhabitants. That's what they gave him. His name? Napoleon Bonaparte. Every crowned head in Europe sleeps soundly that night, certain they've seen the last of him, certain he'll rot on this speck in the Mediterranean, his power snuffed out forever. They were wrong. In 292 days, Napoleon will stand in Paris again, ruling France. How does a man abandoned by every ally, banished by an entire continent, with just 700 soldiers to his name, seize control of the most powerful nation in Europe? Here's exactly what happened. Elba, May of 1814. Napoleon Bonaparte wakes every morning on an island so small a horse can carry him across it in 2 hours. This is his life now. The commander who once directed 500,000 troops now surveys a harbour full of fishing boats. The man who rewrote Europe's legal codes now settles squabbles between farmers. His home, a modest villa with an ocean view. Small rooms, plain furniture, nothing like Versailles. Nothing like the imperial palaces he once filled across a continent. Just a house on a hill, staring out at water he's forbidden to cross. The British have posted a watchman, Colonel Neil Campbell. His job is simple: make sure Napoleon stays put. Campbell drops in regularly, observes, sends reports back to London. The prisoner seems content. Campbell's letters describe a man who gardens, rides horses, reads books. What Campbell doesn't record, or doesn't grasp, is what Napoleon is reading. Every newspaper he can get his hands on, every letter smuggled through loyal contacts, every fragment of intelligence about what's happening in France. And what's happening in France is exactly what Napoleon expected. King Louis XVIII is a disaster. Soldiers who bled for Napoleon across 20 years of war, dismissed without pensions, humiliated, sent home empty-handed. Officers who built their careers under his banner, replaced by aristocrats who hid in England while the fighting raged. Citizens who believed in revolution, equality, the empire, watching everything they sacrificed for get torn apart. France is furious. Napoleon drinks in every detail. Visitors start arriving. Former officers, loyal supporters. They come quietly, claiming they're just passing through. They sit with Napoleon, and their stories all point the same direction. France despises Louis XVIII. The army wants Napoleon back. The people suffer, and the common wisdom says nothing can be done. Napoleon is finished. Everyone believes that. Everyone except Napoleon. He starts running the numbers. He carries the French coastline in his head, memorized. He knows where royalist troops mass thick and where they thin out. He knows which regiments served under him longest, which generals still keep his portrait on the wall, which roads from the southern coast to Paris avoid royalist garrisons entirely. He knows that Campbell, his British minder, keeps slipping away to the Italian mainland. A woman there, regular trips, predictable gaps in surveillance. Napoleon catalogues every detail. He gardens, he rides, he reads, and he waits for the right moment to launch the most audacious comeback in military history. By February of 1815, everything is in place. Everything except one variable: timing. On the 26th of February, Campbell sails for the Italian coast. A routine visit. He's expected back in 3 days. Napoleon watches the British ship dissolve beyond the horizon. Then he turns to his chief of staff. Napoleon Bonaparte is about to invade France with 700 men against an army of 200,000. His invasion fleet? 7 fishing boats. February 26, 1815. Darkness falls. Napoleon's tiny flotilla sits anchored in Portoferraio harbour, loading in absolute silence. No lanterns, no voices. 700 soldiers climb aboard under cover of night. These are not conscripts, they are veterans, hardened survivors of Austerlitz, Wagram, Moscow. Men who marched with Napoleon across every battlefield in Europe, and limped home again. Napoleon paces the dock himself, checking each vessel, speaking quietly to his men. Calm. Precise. The same stillness he carried before every major battle. An officer slides beside him. "Emperor, what if royalist troops meet us when we land?" Napoleon keeps walking. Doesn't break stride. Quote 2. The officer waits. Quote 3. By midnight, the fleet is ready. Napoleon steps aboard his flagship, repainted, flying the Union Jack, disguised as the very British patrol ships hunting for exactly this kind of escape. The flotilla glides from the harbour into open water, into blackness, into everything that could go wrong. The crossing takes 3 days. On day 2, a French royalist warship appears on the horizon, heading straight for them. If that captain recognizes what he's looking at, this is over. Napoleon sends his soldiers below deck. Then he plants himself on the bow in full military dress. As the royalist ship pulls alongside, close enough to shout across the gap, Napoleon's captain calls out casually, quote, 4. The royalist officer leans over his railing. The two ships pass one another and continue in opposite directions. March 1st, 1815. 700 men step onto French soil and begin marching north, 1,100 kilometers to Paris. The royalist army is already scrambling to stop them. But here is the question nobody thinks to ask. Why isn't Napoleon hiding? Why isn't he taking back roads? Why is he walking straight toward a force 10 times his size? In 6 days, outside the gates of Grenoble, the answer will become impossible to deny. March 7th, 1815, Grenoble. Napoleon stops his column 1 kilometer from the royalist regiment blocking the road. Then he does something no one on either side expects. He walks forward, alone, unarmed, straight toward leveled muskets. His officers grab at him. Napoleon doesn't look back. We shall see. He steps into the empty space between his 700 men and the regiment sent to kill him. The road goes silent, only his boots on packed earth. The royalist soldiers watch him come, muskets raised, fingers on triggers, their commander barking orders. "Hold the line! Fire on my command!" Nobody moves, but something is shifting in those ranks. These aren't mercenaries. These aren't foreign conscripts. These are French soldiers, men who served under Napoleon for years, who bled in his wars, who carried his eagle across a continent. And now they're watching him walk toward them. One man in a grey coat, no weapon, no hesitation, moving steadily toward loaded guns. No one fires. Napoleon closes to 50 meters, 30, 20, close enough to see their faces. He stops, raises one hand slowly, removes his hat, and speaks. Not a rousing speech, not a battle cry, a single, quiet statement, carrying across the still road. Quote 9. He pulls his coat wide open, steps forward. Quote 10. Nobody pulls a trigger. The commanding officer keeps screaming orders, but his voice has become irrelevant. Every eye locks onto the figure before them, coat spread, chest bare. The man who marched them through 2 decades of war, the man they pledged their lives to. One musket drops, then a second, then a third. And from somewhere deep in the formation, a voice cracks the silence. Quote 11. The entire regiment breaks, not away from Napoleon, but toward him. Men pour across the road, seizing his hands, clutching his coat. Tears streaming down faces, twisted between laughter and disbelief. The royalist unit dispatched to capture Napoleon has just become his army. Not a single round fired. Napoleon stands in the center of it all, composed, unsurprised, as though he'd scripted this moment down to the second, because he had. This was never a military gambit. It was pure psychological warfare. Napoleon didn't need to overpower the French army. He needed to remind them who they were. 30 seconds, that's all it took. By nightfall, Grenoble throws open its gates. He enters without a shot. 6 days on French soil. 0 bullets spent. But what happens next defies reason. The king's most trusted commander is already marching south with the largest force in France, Marshal Ney, and before leaving Paris, he made one very specific vow to King Louis: he would drag Napoleon back in an iron cage. So, what happens when the man who promised his king an iron cage meets Napoleon face to face? March 10th, Paris. King Louis XVIII calls his most loyal marshal to the royal palace. The room is packed. Courtiers, generals, ministers, every gaze locked on this single exchange. Ney strides in, chest heavy with medals, spine rigid, the most decorated soldier in all of France. The king speaks plainly, loud enough for every ear in the chamber. Ney doesn't hesitate. He draws himself taller and delivers his pledge before the entire court. I will march south, I will find Napoleon, and I will bring him back to Paris in an iron cage. His exact words. Iron cage. Applause erupts through the chamber. The king gives a slow, satisfied nod. Ney turns and leaves to assemble his forces. 6,000 soldiers under his command, trained, armed, sworn to the crown. He carries the king's direct orders. His personal honor and public oath push him forward. He rides south with everything required to crush Napoleon's return in a single afternoon. His officers radiate confidence. His troops stand ready. No one in that army questions what comes next. They hold superior numbers. They own the strategic ground. The full weight of the French crown stands behind them. Napoleon, meanwhile, commands 700 men and a grey coat. March 14th. The two forces draw close enough for Ney to receive field reports on Napoleon's advance. What he reads makes no sense. No battles, no resistance. Entire regiments switching sides. Civilians crowding the roadsides. Officers Ney has fought beside for 20 years, now walking shoulder to shoulder with Napoleon. His own soldiers start receiving letters from old comrades, relatives, friends. Ney commands his men to ignore every word. They're closing the distance. Then Napoleon does something no one anticipates. He sends Ney a letter, personal, handwritten, no military orders, no ultimatum, just words between two men who bled through 20 years of war together. The exact contents have never been verified beyond doubt. But that night, alone in his tent, Ney reads it, and something fractures inside him. The next morning, Ney stands before his 6,000 troops. He holds the letter up, reads it aloud. Then he stops. Looks across their faces, the medals pinned to their chests, the scars carved into their skin from campaigns fought under one flag. Soldiers, he says, the cause of the Bourbons is lost forever. I myself am going to join him. 2 seconds of dead silence. Then 6,000 soldiers explode into roaring celebration. Hours later, Ney rides toward Napoleon's advancing column. Napoleon spots him approaching. He stops the entire march, waits. Ney dismounts, stands before the man he just betrayed a king for. Neither speaks. Then Napoleon steps forward, pulls him into an embrace. Ney says nothing. 6 days ago he swore an oath to a king. Now he's shattered it. 20 years before that, he swore a different oath to a different man. The older promise won. Napoleon now commands 7,000 soldiers. Paris is 3 days away. King Louis XVIII receives the news about Ney that same evening. The colour drains from his face. He turns to his ministers. Silence. Because there is nothing left to say. Every piece on the board, gone. Every army, every general, every city has turned. He stands, walks to his private chambers and starts packing. The King of France is about to flee his own capital in the middle of the night. Napoleon has not fired a single bullet to make this happen. March 20th, 1815. The French throne has sat empty for exactly 6 hours when Napoleon Bonaparte enters Paris. King Louis XVIII slipped away at midnight. No announcement, no farewell, no final proclamation, just a carriage dissolving into darkness, rolling north toward the Belgian border. His servants found his rooms empty the next morning. The King of France had abandoned his own capital under cover of night. And now, 6 hours later, the man who caused his flight has arrived. Napoleon's column pushes into Paris from the south. Word tears through the city faster than the soldiers can march. People flood the streets. Windows bang open. Crowds gather on every corner. By the time Napoleon reaches the Tuileries Palace, the street is so thick with bodies, his carriage cannot move. Soldiers try to force a path. Impossible. The crowd isn't angry. The opposite. People scream his name, hurl their hats skyward, claw toward his carriage, weep, laugh, push forward just to touch the vehicle. Napoleon steps out. The crowd erupts. He doesn't speak, doesn't need to. He stands there while Paris loses its mind around him. His officers lock into a tight ring, fighting to guide him toward the palace entrance. The mob makes this nearly impossible. Bodies press from every direction, hands grabbing his coat, his fingers, his hat. Grizzled veterans shove through the mass, desperate for a handshake. Women hurl flowers. Children ride on shoulders, craning over the ocean of heads. Inside the Tuileries, Napoleon moves through rooms he hasn't seen in 11 months. Everything sits exactly where King Louis XVIII left it. The furniture, the paintings, official documents still stacked on the desk. The king fled so fast he didn't even organize his papers. That night, Paris celebrates. 19 days. That's how long it took. Napoleon landed with 700 soldiers on March 1st. He walks into Paris on March 20th. Between those dates, not one battle fought, not one shot fired in anger. Every army sent to stop him switched sides. Every city ordered to bar its gates threw them wide open. But here is what Napoleon grasps, and what the cheering crowds outside do not. Every monarch in Europe has just received the same terrifying report. Napoleon is back, and they are already mobilizing. 700,000 troops are closing in on France from every direction. Napoleon has exactly one option: strike first. Find them before they link up. Destroy them one by one. What he does next is so brilliant that military strategists still study it. And what goes wrong is so devastating that historians still argue about it 2 centuries later. Napoleon has 125,000 soldiers staring down a seemingly impossible problem. 700,000 enemies converging from all sides. His solution is so elegant, so precise, so mathematically flawless that it should have worked. It almost did. Here is the plan. 2 Allied armies are currently stationed in Belgium. Wellington's British hold the western position. Blücher's Prussians anchor the east, close enough to support each other, but not yet unified. A gap exists between them, and Napoleon sees it. Hit Blücher first. Destroy him before Wellington can respond. Then swing west and crush Wellington before Blücher recovers. 2 armies, 2 battles, 48 hours. The math works. The timing works. On paper, flawless. June 16, 1815. Napoleon slams into Blücher at Ligny. The fighting is vicious, merciless. 80,000 French soldiers against 84,000 Prussians. 8 hours of grinding combat. By nightfall, Blücher's army is broken and fleeing. Blücher himself gets thrown from his horse, nearly crushed under the hooves. The Prussians are finished as a fighting force. Napoleon has done exactly what he planned. Now he needs to finish the job. He turns to Marshal Grouchy, 33,000 troops. 1 order. Follow Blücher. Do not let him regroup. Do not let him reach Wellington. Keep him running. Grouchy nods and marches east into the forest. Napoleon wheels west, toward Wellington. June 17th. Napoleon's army slogging through torrential rain toward a small Belgian village. Waterloo. Wellington has positioned his forces along a ridge just south of it. Classic defensive setup. High ground, protected flanks. He's been fortifying this spot for days. He knows Napoleon is coming. He's ready. But Wellington is also waiting. Blücher has promised him reinforcements. If the Prussians arrive in time, Wellington has enough strength to hold. If they don't, he faces Napoleon's full army alone. Everything now depends on whether Grouchy can keep Blücher pinned down. June 18th, 11:30 in the morning. Napoleon delays his attack. Last night's rain has turned the ground to soup. His artillery pieces can't roll through the muck. He waits for the earth to firm up. 2 hours, maybe 3. Seems like a small call. It isn't. This is the decision that destroys him. Because while Napoleon waits for mud to dry, Blücher is already moving. Not east, not away from Wellington, west, toward Waterloo. And Grouchy is nowhere near him. Grouchy is trudging through a Belgian forest in the wrong direction, following his orders to the letter, while the entire battle's outcome crystallizes in the next few hours. Noon. Napoleon finally strikes. Wellington's line refuses to buckle. French infantry storms up the ridge, gets torn apart, falls back, storms again. British squares lock together and will not break. Cavalry charges crash forward, artillery hammers down. Hours of savage, unrelenting combat, and Wellington's line bends, but does not snap. 3 in the afternoon. Napoleon is growing impatient. Wellington should be destroyed by now. No room to maneuver, no reinforcements coming. He should be crumbling, slowly grinding down to nothing. But Wellington holds. Every French breakthrough meets fresh reserves rushing to seal the gap. Every charge that should shatter the formation gets swallowed whole. Napoleon checks his watch, looks at the ridge, then turns east. 4 o'clock. Napoleon lifts his telescope, scanning the far horizon. His staff clusters beside him, eyes locked on the same distant point. For one breath, hope. Maybe it's Grouchy. Maybe reinforcements have finally come. The dust cloud edges closer. Flags emerge through the haze. Black eagles on yellow fields. Prussian colors. Not Grouchy. Blücher. 30,000 fresh Prussian troops slamming into Napoleon's right flank at the exact moment his army has nothing left to give. 20 kilometers away in Grouchy's camp, his officers hear the distant thunder of cannon fire rolling in from Waterloo. They beg him, march toward the guns. Grouchy refuses. His orders are clear. Quote, 22. He follows his orders. While the battle that will determine Europe's fate rages on without him, Napoleon throws in everything he has left. The Imperial Guard, his personal reserve, the most lethal soldiers France has ever produced. These men have never tasted defeat, never taken a single step backward. They exist for exactly this moment. They march up the ridge in flawless columns, eagles glinting above them. This is Napoleon's last roll of the dice. Everything he has built, staked on one charge. Wellington watches them climb. He waits, lets them close the distance. Then he stands in his stirrups, thrusts his sword forward. Every British cannon fires at once. The guard stumbles, staggers, keeps coming, gets hit again. And then something happens that has not happened in 20 years of Napoleonic warfare. The Imperial Guard shatters. They turn. They run. The moment Napoleon's soldiers see the Guard fleeing, something inside the entire army breaks. Every man on that field understands, in a single, sickening instant, that it is over. The retreat becomes a rout. The rout becomes a stampede. Then pure chaos. Every soldier clawing through Belgian mud to survive, Prussian cavalry slashing them down from behind. Napoleon stands on a hilltop, watching his empire come apart. His marshals crowd around him, begging him to flee. He doesn't move. Not for a long time. He just watches. Then he turns his horse and rides away. 8 hours. That's how long the battle lasted. An army he had rebuilt over 19 days without firing a single shot, destroyed in one afternoon. The 100 days that started on a beach in southern France with 700 men ends here. A rain-soaked field in Belgium. Everything gone. June 22nd, 1815. Napoleon abdicates for the second time, 4 days after Waterloo. There is no Elba waiting for him now, no quaint Mediterranean island with 12,000 residents and a sea view. The British choose a place from which no man escapes. St. Helena, a volcanic speck in the South Atlantic, 2,000 kilometers from the nearest continent. 4,000 inhabitants. This desolate rock becomes Napoleon Bonaparte's final cage. 6 years he spends there, the last 6 years of his life. No cannons, no armies to maneuver, no maps to study, just ocean. Endless blue in every direction, and a small house on a low hill. From that house he dictates his story to anyone who will listen, reshaping his legend word by word from memory. If this story has stayed with you, consider subscribing to support what we do here. We appreciate it.